Hello, everybody. It's that time of the week whenever we post realignment clips on the Breaking Points channel. We've got a great guest for all of you today, Elbridge Colby. He's served in the Pentagon, actually, under the Trump administration, but wrote the National Defense Strategy. But he joined us because he wrote a new book, and he wants to promote the idea that not only are we already in great power competition with China, but how we should think about it, why we need to get the hell out of the Middle East, why we need to look a little bit away from Europe. But he's not an isolationist. He's looking towards what he sees is the big new threat. And I find his arguments pretty compelling.
And look, we know the audience. We know there's a whole set of people in the comments already. They're talking about China, think tanks, defense contractors. What makes Bridge's book so interesting is that it's about a moment in time. You could either agree that we need to defend Taiwan, or you could disagree with that. The point is that for the past 20 years, all of our foreign policy decisions were about what happens in Iraq, what happens in Kabul. Bridges' argument is that everything, whether you are pro or con, is going to be defined around the Asia-Pacific region. So many good things there. And I want to make a quick shout out to something that's coming out on Thursday. We have an excellent episode of Brett Weinstein and Heather Hayek. It's about their new book about the 21st century. There's lots of really great stuff there. So if you enjoy this clip and you want to see our episode tomorrow, go follow the YouTube channel link below and check out our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. Here's the episode. I'd like you to speak to how great power conflict and the competition with China will reshape the U.S. military, because another thing, I'm just taking this opportunity to just throw all my frustrations. I don't tweet much, so I'm saving it for here.
Okay.
There's this whole rhetoric of America can't win wars. That's the lesson of Iraq and Afghanistan. And I think what's happening there is you're seeing folks who are too granularly focused on the specific styles of wars that we're not particularly good at versus the kind that we actually are good at. So for example, 2003 Iraq, wow, right? That was really, really excellent. 2001 Afghanistan, combining CIA assets with like innovative drones, light footprints, tribal allies with the Northern Alliance. Very good at that. I like to joke that the same people who, because of political reasons, dunk on H.R. McMaster, like look at H.R. McMaster as a tank commander in Desert Storm and ask whether or not this person knows how to win battles. The point is that the style of warfare that we engaged in after 2001 and after 2003, that is the style where it's actually political. It's not a question of how many people can you defeat. It's a question of, can you get the Iraqis to reconcile? Can you construct an Afghan state? This is where your Burkean point is very important. Now that we're focusing on the China conversation, it's like you said, high technology, naval power, a reconfigured Air Force. Can you speak to how the Army, Marine Corps, Air Force, Navy that most of our audience has grown used to is basically going to look fundamentally different over the course of the next 20 years than it did over the past 20 years?
Yeah, well, I hope it changes. I mean, I think you're exactly right, Marshall. I mean, I think, look, we're not good at nation building. I'm not sure anybody's good at nation building, but if you're going to be an imperialist, you got to be ruthless and cynical, and we just aren't. I mean, that's my takeaway. The people, the real argument against the defense contractor kind of thing is people actually believed it at the Coalition Provisional Authority. They thought all the Iraqis would want to have a democracy like just, basically like in the U.S. I mean, I'm simplifying.
Which is scarier than the defense contractor.
Yeah, exactly.
It's way worse. Yeah,
it's exactly. I mean, no culture. You kind of knew the culture, but it was always in the context. It's sort of like the ethnic parade kind of thing that I'm talking about, or, once a year you put on your ethnic robes or whatever, instead of actually being deeply rooted. So we're bad at that. And it's always been that. We were not good at that in Vietnam and so forth. Frankly, ground warfare in general, it's never been our strong suit. I mean, it's we're essentially kind of an island in the geopolitical context. To go back to another analogy, our position is a little bit like England was, or Great Britain was in Europe in the early modern, much of the modern period. That's kind of how we are, and we're a democracy. When we're very rich, so our best is high technology things where that kind of dominates. Ground warfare often, even in the modern era, can often come down to guys on the ground with guns duking it out. I mean, I'm not the world's expert by any stretch, but I think our army is very good, has a lot of capability. But the thing that really matters in what I'm talking about dealing with China is naval warfare and aerospace, and I'm talking air up into outer space. That is our wheelhouse, and we've lost the bubble on that. I mean, one of the things when I talk to military audiences, I often say, look, in this day and age, the famous movies people watch about the military are about Afghanistan and Iraq and so forth. But what we really want is to go back to the 1980s, where the most famous movie about the military was about a guy going to training school, Top Gun.
Yep.
Right? I mean, that's what people should be going and doing, is training their butts off to go toe to toe with the best of the best of the best, to quote, Iceman or whoever said it in Top Gun. But I think that's what we want. But that is where we're good. That can be extraordinarily dangerous, especially if nuclear weapons become involved, not only over there, but at home. But that is where we're good. And I was struck. I was watching that recent remake of the Midway movie, which, is pluses and minuses. But I was kind of trolling around on Wikipedia afterwards, and that couple things, we were actually outnumbered and kind of outgunned in a lot of ways. And 75 years ago, but I mean, that's the straight linear tradition to today's Navy. They won fair and square decisively. And that was through things that the Navy has continued to cultivate, inventiveness, technology, skill, courage, et cetera. Those are that shows our wheelhouse. And I think that's what we need. And we need to get back that, and we need our military to change accordingly. The problem is, a lot of people don't want to do that. And one of the things I really think is critical coming out of the Afghanistan context is that not only that the Biden administration get all the scrutiny and opprobrium that it deserves for this mishandling of the withdrawal, but also that the dominant sort of set within the military over the last 20, 25 years has been the Coinistas, basically, the people who've made their names in the Middle East. And honestly, at the end of the day,
can you explain, this is actually very important.
Explain.
We haven't done an insurgency. Can you explain like the counterinsurgency? Because this was a huge thing 10 years ago.
Yeah. So 10, 15 years ago, there was this whole idea that there was a kind of science of how to do counterinsurgency. Basically, if you're in, you go into the Middle East, you go into some kind of area where there's chaos and disorder and insurgency, you've got this book called Counterinsurgency, or the Science, and you can apply it, and you do ink blots, and you do pacification, and ultimately you'll be able to get to a good place. And of course, the greatest example of this was kind of the apotheosis of the surge and this sort of thing. And the strong case was, we know how to do this. We can do this. We can go around into the developing world and basically have satisfactory outcomes. And I think what we've seen over the last 10 years is that's manifestly false, especially in Afghanistan. But I don't think Iraq has anything to write home about either, given the costs that we've incurred over it, both human, financial, and geopolitical. So I think but coming out of Afghanistan, it's really important that be internalized and understood and scrutinized, that, it's not personal, is not the primary thing, but that the whole kind of ascendancy of the people who were all about counterinsurgency and the wars in the Middle East. I mean, at the end of the day, not only did Afghanistan fall apart, but apparently they were surprised. I mean, General Milley was surprised.
Right.
Is that possible? How good are we at this? Not good. And we don't need it, So it's like, we need a new generation, a new type of leader in the military who has different orientations, focused on a great power competition and this kind of high-end warfare in particular that's designed to defend our exposed allies there.
Can you just reiterate then, in the post-Afghan reprioritization, we're talking about naval power, aerospace, and how do we prevent that from becoming a quote unquote like boondoggle with the military industrial complex, if you're going to accept, the reality of such things? Because I easily foresee, more F-35 programs, more, and look, I'm very pro Space Force, but, I haven't seen a pretty ambitious project yet that has come out of it. The last time I checked, the Navy's new, I don't think it's called a destroyer, but they didn't make enough so that it costs $1 million a round to fire their fancy new guns. Like, we don't seem particularly adept at playing in this new sphere either. So what does that look like in terms of the reprioritization? Yeah,
there's malevolence and malfeasance, but a lot of this is structural. Is the kind of the regulatory environment that our procurement process has to go through. Everything has to be checked down to the nines. All this kind of a kind of risk-averse approach. I'm skeptical that we'll be able to radically improve our technology point. I know some of the big tech names like Eric Schmidt are out there calling for that. And that's, while I'm very sympathetic to the pushback on the social media companies, I do think Schmidt is right about that. which is to say we need our defense establishment to leverage the technology that we are, as a country are creating and cultivating. I think to your point about the military-industrial complex, I mean, this is another point. Like back 10 years ago, there were a Republican coalition for increasing defense spending, and I was never that enthusiastic about it. I mean, my preference would be to spend as little as possible on defense. But I think we're at a point now where we're at this kind of Germany point where like we got to spend now so we don't have to spend later, both in blood and money. And again, I think the defense companies are not, they're going to do what they're told. Ultimately, they have their influence, but it's akin to the influence of other corporations and so forth in American life, which is, significant, but it's something that's just in the nature of an advanced society. And so they deserve scrutiny and so forth. But, what I'm hoping is that we can get the system to adapt. The problem is the system hasn't adapted enough. So when I was in the Pentagon in the Trump administration, I, led the development of the National Defense Strategy of 2018, which did try to orient in this direction. But there has been some progress, but not fast enough, and China may have an incentive, as I think I said earlier, to move this decade. And, there's a lot of congressional districts that have certain factories, so it's hard to retire old weapons. And we just don't have time anymore. So I think, I think the main problem we have right now is that we might lose a war to China, and we can clean up on the military-industrial complex side as we do that, and it's an important issue. But I think that can't be our primary focus.